Welcome to Rediscovering Wisdom podcast, where we talk about human nature, happiness, and the hidden costs of civilization. Sharing bold insights with author Chet Shupe on why true contentment begins when we listen to our instincts.
Hi there. My name is Chet Shupe. I've recently written a book entitled Rediscovering the Wisdom of Human Nature: How Civilization Destroys Happiness. My professional background is in electronics engineering. And so you might wonder, what is an engineer doing writing on human behavior? Well, I guess I stumbled onto it. It all started when I was born many years ago. I hate to tell you how many. With attention deficit disorder. And that was back in the days where that wasn't even known as an issue. And so it wasn't diagnosed until I was 43 years old. And that occurred because my son, Greg, had ADD, and he was treated with Ritalin, and that made a dramatic difference in his performance at school, socially, and every other thing. That my wife, Joyce, realized what my problem was. And so she got me treated with ADD, with Ritalin, which was no small thing back then, because they weren't treating adults for ADD, and they certainly weren't giving them Ritalin. So I might be one of the first people that was ever on Ritalin. But at any rate, I woke up the next morning and I look out at the world, and it made sense. The world to me had always before looked like some painting, surrealistic painting, in which the things just didn't fit together right. And I just could not believe it. It was a miracle. I pinched myself. Well, anyhow, as things developed, I ended up giving some talks around at schools because there was teachers and things that wanted other parents to know about my experience. Because people are naturally reluctant to give children drugs. And I appreciate that. But sometimes they can be lifesavers. Not in all instances, not everyone. I mean, we're all different. So my case is not universal. It just happened that Ritalin got my synapses to communicating in my brain, so that my subconscious mind started doing the things it was supposed to do all along. And that made a dramatic difference in what I consciously experienced as reality. And so I decided, well, maybe I should write on brain dysfunction to provide a conceptual framework for medically treating the brain. And after all, I had an insight that most people don't have, living for 43 years with a dysfunctional subconscious mind, and then all of a sudden have it start doing the things it evolved to do. And I knew how much of our lives were defined by subconscious processes, virtually all of them. The rational mind doesn't control anything. It just reacts to a massive amount of processing that goes on there, the way that processing tells it to react. And then we become a functioning being. Well, so once I decided I'd write on brain dysfunction, I thought, well, if I'm going to write on about the brain, I need to, first of all, have a clear picture in my mind what the purpose of the brain is. And then I could think about how it has to be organized so it can realize what it evolved to do. And so after a while, I came up with this what I call brain diagram. And the three main features we're going to be talking about throughout well, we're not going to be referring to this. I just want to show you the three main features here we're going to be talking about. This deal here is emotional intelligence. It interprets all the information that's coming in through all your sensory system. And based on what your circumstances are, it decides how to react to them. And then all of these arrows out here, you can't tell what's it, but each of these arrows have a feeling at the end of it. Will to live, joy, romance, anger, hunger. And then it emotes the feeling that tells you what you need to do regarding what your circumstance. I mean, if it's getting chilly, you put a jacket on. But you only know that through the pain of chill. You know what you need to do through the feeling. And so this governs all animate life, including humans, back before there were monetary and legal systems. Here is intellectual intelligence. And intellectual intelligence exists for adapting to the habitat. In other words, its decisions are based on knowledge that you've learned from personal experience. These decisions are based on genetic wisdom, our human nature, instincts that's been accumulating throughout evolution and tells you through a feeling how to react to your circumstances in a way that serves the species. See, our purpose is, at least from my viewing of the brain, our purpose is to serve the species that gifted us with life. See, only through serving that species can our species go on and gift other people with life. In other words, we're paying back the process of nature that gave us with life. But we don't know that from a conscious point of view. We don't know because you don't have to. Emotional intelligence takes care of all that. Think of emotional intelligence as a GPS. It analyzes every situation that we're in details, far beyond anything you and I could imagine. And it knows from experience, from evolution, from selection of the individuals that are most able to serve the species. Those are the genes that survive. And so it does what the feeling tells it to do, and then it serves its purpose without ever having to know its purpose. Okay, well, the point, I guess that basically what I am introducing through my book and through these podcasts, I'm trying to introduce the fact that emotional intelligence exists. You see, before there was language and before humans came along and decided they wanted to control life, they wanted to control the future, that emotional intelligence governed life. And that came from nature. And through it, we were connected to the nature in each of us. We were connected to the nature that sustained us. And we were kind of, from the conscious mind's point of view, we were just we were at one with nature, which is, I think, how the animals are. They are at one with nature. And the goal of the conscious mind was contentment. In other words, if you had done everything if you had resolved all your feelings in the moment, living in the moment, you were free to resolve your feelings. Sure, there were hard times to go through. There were things to overcome, and so it didn't mean a perfect ideal existence. There was still territory to defend, and but if you were true to your feelings, you were living in the moment, and you still felt connected with everything. And that comes with a feeling of contentment. And we've all had this at times. There have been times when you've just literally felt one with it all. And I think that in our natural life, when emotional intelligence was in control, that's how we felt all the time. And but humans got language, and because language gave us the ability to worry about imagined futures, things we couldn't do without the spoken word, then we naturally wanted to control life. We wanted control over life because we wanted a certain future. Well, unfortunately, that intellectual intelligence sort of took over the role of emotional intelligence, because intellectual intelligence, the very that was able to imagine those uncertainties, it was able to create legal systems and create gods, and it came up with imaginary ways of controlling the future. And so we started taking comfort in our belief systems, in our ideologies, and our gods. And I mean, this was natural. This wasn't because, in other words, this is kind of something without knowing how life works. We had no choice other than to do. Because suddenly our concern about whether we were going to have a place to live 20 years from now became a lot bigger to us than whether we were going to take pleasure in serving our brothers or sisters' needs right now. See, before then, the only pleasure we had was taking care of each other. But once we were concerned about how we're going to live through this unknowable future, then we took all our pleasure in things that gave us the belief that we would have a place to live 20 years from now. Well, that disconnected us from our emotional intelligence. It disconnected us emotionally from our purpose for being here. It disconnected us emotionally from the people around us. We no longer have extended families. We no longer have brothers and sisters. We no longer have a village in which to raise our children, because we're all out here trying to make it on our own. And it's painful. And I guess that at this point, I'll just summarize it by saying, somehow I stumbled upon the idea that emotional intelligence exists. You see, since we left Eden, shall we say, see, before Eden, we trusted our lives to our feelings. If you do what feels right and you do not do what feels wrong, then you are going to be comfortable with yourself. And as strange as it may seem, if you can get comfortable with yourself, then you are serving life. That's the way it works. But suddenly, we want to control life instead of flow with life. So suddenly, we were in a situation in which we had to reject, we had to do things that feel bad in order to be righteous. In other words, before Eden, there was no good or evil. There was just what feels right and what feels wrong. After Eden, in Eden, when we acquired the knowledge of good and evil, now we took what comfort we can in securing our future by being good and not being evil. But unfortunately, a lot of things that you got to do to be good don't feel good. And every time you're in that situation where you have to do things that don't feel good in order to be good, then you're not going to find any comfort. You're not going to find any rewards, deep rewards. You can't get high on life anymore. Because to be high on life, you have to react to now according to how you feel. See, before then, we were addicted to life. We were addicted to taking care of each other. That's what made us feel good. Now we're out here where we got to each make it on our own. We are competing with each other for a place to live. Well, that don't feel good. I don't care how well you get yourself fixed up materially, wealth and privilege and all that. You're never going to be rewarded by your emotional intelligence. All the rewards come from your intellectual intelligence. And all those rewards come from out there. What we want are the rewards that come from inside. And they only come from emotional intelligence. And you see, what we all want ultimately, and I think I can say this, and I'm pretty sure in each of your hearts you'll agree, what we all want is our lives to count. We want our lives to make a difference. And out here, when we have to serve self just to survive, we have to make it on our own just to survive. We're so busy just surviving that, when you're down at work and you're spending most of your time doing things you don't feel like doing, that's your instincts telling you that you're not serving life. And that's your instincts telling you that your life is not counting. And so I'm just going to say, to sign off here, to say that recognizing that emotional intelligence exists has made a lot of difference in how I see things. Now, I'm still acting like I'm a subject of the state because I have to do that in order to survive, and so do you. So I'm not talking about any instant cure here. That when you realize that emotional intelligence exists, if you come to agree with me, that suddenly your life is going to be transformed, because it isn't. To survive, we still got to comply with legal obligations. And that means leaves emotional obligations in the dust. And that's where the real suffering comes from. But if enough people come to recognize that emotional intelligence exists, the idea is someday getting back to where we can be true to who we are instead of having to continue to pretend we're someone we're not, just for the sake of our personal survival. And whether that can ever happen or not, I don't know. You know, the authors of Genesis said it couldn't. They said God put an angel with a flame-throwing sword to guard the path of the tree of life. So that's how they saw it. And they might be right. There's no way back. But wouldn't it be something if we could prove them wrong? You know, that is something that even they would celebrate. They didn't say that we couldn't come back because we didn't deserve to come back or anything like that. They were just trying to tell us, hey, folks, stop here. Think about what you're doing. And I have found that the recognition that emotional intelligence exists to be a great benefit in enabling me to think about what's going on here. We all know something's wrong. I don't know if I'm never going to argue that I'm right. All I have is some ideas to offer you and see what happens. And so, hopefully, well, I'll be back on here some. Hopefully, you'll be you'll be here, and we'll go on this trip together. I've been on this trip alone for 40 years. I tell you, it's been a lonely trip. Be really great to have some people on the trip with me. So come back and join us, and we'll see where it takes us. I'm going to read a couple of things before I get off the air. You may or may not understand this right now, but I promise you that if you hang with me, you will have a much bigger feel for it. One of them is entitled How Civilization Destroys Happiness. And it's 2 paragraphs here. In a spiritually free culture, there is no good or evil. It's all about feelings. To serve life, do things that feel good, and your enjoyment is your reward. In a civil culture, everything is about good and evil. Nothing is about feeling. However, when you do things that don't feel good in order to be good, your suffering is your spirit punishing you for not serving life. The other thing I have is I wrote this a couple of years ago. It's 80 words. It took me 40 years to reach a point where I had enough understanding of what I think our circumstances are to write it. And so I think of it as being, I wrote this at the rate of 2 words a year. So it's been well thought out, whether it makes any sense or not. The title is What's Real and What Isn't? What's real for social beings is largely how we feel in our relationships with the people around us. If we are connected to them because we need each other to survive, then love is real. If not, loneliness is real. What's not real? Beliefs, legal systems, money, and ideologies are not real because they require us to deny how we feel in the moment to realize the future they promise. Promised futures are lonely. Being forced to sell our souls to get there, we will not find love awaiting us upon our arrival. Thank you.